Yeah, I would argue that one of the most intense feelings you can get from playing a role-playing game is the what that comes from learning the truth behind something you had already made a very clear conception of.
Yeah, you think it has been about this one thing all the time, and then you lift over that final stone, and
it's
you
that
were
sense
wrong.
of wonder
Mm-hmm.
that you had things figured out, or so you thought. Revealing. It's not that kind of mystery game where the mystery is everything. It's a reveal game, if you will.
Today on The Terrible Warriors, another Meet the Maker interview where I get to sit down with the people who make the games that we enjoy playing. Today, the creator of Symbaroum, Mattias Johnsson Haake. Symbaroum is an award-winning game, winning 2 Ennies in 2019 for Best Interior Design and Best Layout. And the reason we get to talk today is because they've just released the Symbaroum Starter Kit, which will get you and your game group ready to explore this dark and intriguing world of theirs. And while Mattias and Symbaroum seemed like such a natural fit at Free League Games, it wasn't always that way. In fact, long ago, Mattias was involved in another publishing company that when they had to close shop and liquidate their assets, sold Coriolis, their original creation, to a video game developer who would eventually sell that intellectual property to Free League Games. And that's just one of the weird stories on how they've all come back together again, working under the same roof. It was so interesting a story that I wanted to talk to him about that first, before we sat down and talked about Symbaroum, because honestly, as good as the game is, knowing the context of how that game came to be where it is today is really inspiring. So right out of the gate, I did want to ask, where did it all begin, and how did we end up where we are now?
Our history started in 2001, just after the turn of the millennium, when me and basically a group of friends who were, most of us were at universities or beginning our careers, but we wanted to stay in touch. We were living basically all over Europe, or at least all over Scandinavia at the time. And we decided that why not put our passion to work and also make that into, a uniting and a way to stick together and do stuff together. So we decided to start a game studio and make our very first role-playing game. This was, of course, after we had played role-playing games together for many, many years. And that first game was a game called Mutant, Heirs of Doom, or in Swedish, Undergångens arvtagare. And I can, as a spoiler already, the next iteration of that very game was called Mutant Year Zero. So now you see where I'm going with this. We kept at it as a hobby, only releasing the game in Swedish for 7 or 8 years or something like that. And over this period of time, we worked together with lots of cool freelancers. One of those who I think he first approached us with a draft of a novel set in the world of Mutant Heirs of Doom. His name was Thomas Härenstam. And as we created our own very, original IP I think we released it in 2008. It was called Coriolis. And then we were approached by 2 guys called Nils Karlén and Costa Kostalus. Also, I think Christian Granat was in on that to some extent, but they were big fans of Coriolis. And just after we had released Coriolis, and we had these 2 games that we were working on, life caught up with us, and we realized we don't have time to have hobbies because not only did we had graduated, we had started our day jobs. Many of us also started families and got kids, and life as it goes had its forced us more or less to first work less and less with Järnringen, and then finally we decided to call it quits. So that company called Järnringen Förlag, the publishing house of Järnringen, we was liquidated, actually. And in that process, we wanted to assure that our game, Coriolis, our original game, survived. So we sold it to one of our co-founders of Järnringen, who is, or rather his company, which is Paradox Interactive, a big computer company in Sweden, computer games company in Sweden. And he in turn, or Paradox in turn, licensed the game to a newcomer on the Swedish role-playing games heaven, namely Fria Ligan, Free League.
And that was Thomas Heremstem was part of that. So this game was now being traded around and it ended up being licensed to someone who was a friend of yours who had worked on this first version of Mutant Year Zero. And
back then, I wouldn't call us friends. We were more like
just
acquaintances.
Colleagues, peers.
Yeah, acquaintances. He had worked a little bit on with us. He started working on the Year Zero engine. Back then it was called the version 0 as an alternative rules engine for our version of Mutant, Heirs of Doom. So we knew of each other, and he had started this company, Fria Ligan, together with Nils and Costa and Christian, who were big fans of Coriolis. So naturally, it felt to us all as if they wanted to, they should continue working.
Yeah, it was in the hands of people who understood the game, the importance of the game, where it came from, and there was these were hands you could trust it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as we closed shop, the license of Mutant was available again, and Fria Ligan picked that up and made Mutant Year Zero, which was kind of their first international
then the rest is history.
Launch. The rest is history.
So Freely goes off with the Year Zero engine and with Mutant Year Zero, and then begin to publish their own, and as it being translated into English. Around that time, we start seeing stuff like Tales from the Loop and Forbidden Lands being made using that engine. But meanwhile, you have not left the gaming industry.
We did for a while.
The company had closed up, and you had moved on with your life. But I'm sure there was always the back of your mind this hobby, this love of these games and these ideas that you had. And this wasn't originally a Free League game, but the game we're talking about today, you return to designing. Now, did something happen before Symbaroum, or?
No, actually, we, as I said, we closed shop, but some of us couldn't stand living without making role-playing games. So we were on a games trip, actually, to Istanbul, and we were drinking tea in the shade of the Blue Mosque. And we said to ourselves, this was me, Mattias Lilja, my co-designer of the rules and setting, and Martin Grip. You know him from Symbaroum and Coriolis and Alien, and he also works on the One Ring currently. And we have been playing games, the three of us, for going on 4 decades. So we were sitting there by the Blue Mosque, and we said, we can't live like this. We need to make a role-playing game. And we hadn't made a fantasy game as of yet, which was kind of strange because it's always been our favorite genre.
That always seems to be the default setting for, or at least the default assumption of tabletop gaming, is that it
Yeah,
starts
exactly.
in fantasy before it spins off into other genres.
Yeah, but I think we were a little bit afraid, a little bit daunted by the fact that the market was so crowded, for one thing. The other thing is we didn't want to get it wrong. We had this...
Does the world need yet another sword and sorcery game?
So, but then we sparked life in the company again, together with two other guys, one of which is actually Johan Noor, who nowadays he's the designer of or the graphic designer of Mörkborg, if you've heard of it.
We've actually very recently looked into that game for our Session Zero, and I ran it as part of our monthly private game with my Patreon supporters, and I love that game. I love the just the Spotify playlist they put out along with the Kickstarter.
Yeah, I love it too.
That whole setting is just absolutely wild. There's this like micro ecosystem of designers, all from the same little community that are now starting to feed on each other and coming up with these games to make. And they're all...
not only that, we are also feeding each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not all take. It's very much a culture of generosity where we help each other and support each other. And Sweden actually has a lot of other small game studios as well. Freely being the major one today, but obviously the cool games are being created in every little town in this country, it seems. I don't want to go into trying to explain how this came to be, because I really don't know. But and calling it an industry today, I mean, it's a well spread hobby for the most part. And one of the things that are so fantastic about tabletop role playing games is that it puts you in the creator's seat as soon as you start playing. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Being a player in a role-playing game is to be a co-producer of the story that is being told. And I think that's one of the reasons why so much creativity springs from this hobby compared to, I mean, of course, music and film and books and video games can also be a great inspiration for your own creation.
There's a place of collaboration in tabletop gaming that is in other medium is much more passive, where I can play a video game, but I'm consuming the game. I'm not really part of the creation of that game. There are ways I can be involved through early access and beta testing or things like that allow me to support that game, but I'm not really able to take any credit into that. Whereas every tabletop game you play, you're involved in the creation of that story that you are playing in the present that no one else will be a part of, and it becomes quite addictive afterwards, because it's hard to go back to just then reading a book and not being able to have any say in what happens next.
Exactly.
So Symbaroum is coming around. You're with these friends. You're in Istanbul. You are passionate about making this thing happen, and you've got this idea.
Yeah, we knew. I mean, we shan't go into the process itself. We started out a couple of days Googling art and inspirational ideas, and saved all the stuff into one and the same folder. And then we went off, because we were living at three different locations. I think Martin was in London, Mattias Lilja was in Stockholm, and I live in Umeå in the very north of Sweden. And then we kept doing our day jobs and whatnot, but this was like on the slow boiler.
Yeah.
And in 2014 we released, 2014 we released the Swedish version of the game. But the idea was like from the very start to, or I had more or less given them an ultimatum. I said that like I don't have time for a hobby. If we're going to do this, we will try to make it into a living. Not directly, of course. It will take time. Mattias Lilja said that this will be a marathon. And it surely has been, establishing a brand, making it known, setting up the distribution and whatnot. But we just wouldn't fail on this. So in 2016, I think, or at the turn of the year, 15, 16, we released the English version. And I cannot say that it took off like a rocket, because it didn't. But what we did notice is that the people that actually got around to, or got a chance to see it and pick it up and play it, really got hooked right away. So we knew that we were working on something that both we loved and that was appreciated by the players. So that gave us the stamina, the strength, the energy to really, take it one slow step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time, I don't know, by this time, Free League was not what it is today. They were bigger. They were 1 or 2 years, no, about 1 year before us with the English version of Mutant Year Zero. And immediately when we restarted Järnringen, we also started talking to Thomas and Nils and Costa and the guys about somewhere down the line we will most likely come together into one company. And so that was more or less the intent from us all, provided that we could find a common ground and get along, of course.
Yeah.
But it took a couple of years, mostly because all of us, we were so busy making games, and we hardly had time to breathe, much less have time to, go through all the formalities and all the corporate things you need to do, legal things you need to do to merge two companies.
I think fans of tabletop gaming underestimate how small even the biggest games out there are, where companies like Free League Games and Magpie Games are the biggest independent, and we're still talking like less than a dozen people total for the company, compared to video game companies where even the smallest indie studios might be about 20 people once you get to all of the business involved. Even the smallest games, like these games, people that are huge in independent role playing that are winning awards. Most of these companies are 2 people or 1 person, and and are just making it work however they can. And it is so difficult to actually make money making tabletop gaming that this is such a labor of love. And in hearing this story about your 2 companies, I think something to remind the listener here is that we're talking about, I believe at the time, companies that are still, less than 10 people on both sides. And they're both trying to make, and you're not just making the games, you're doing everything in this company and trying to work this all out. And there's not a huge support network, no matter where you are. Whereas once you get, it goes from a dozen people at Free League to then Wizards of the Coast, and it is such a gap between the independent publisher or Paizo, and it is such a massive gulf between these 2 worlds, and yet once you arrive at a place like Gen Con and your booths are right next to each other, and it is very easy to presume that the people that are behind Coriolis and Forbidden Lands are this huge mega corporation coming out of Europe, and and yet almost everyone at that booth represents the majority of the entire company.
Yeah, and that's exactly true. I am fortunate enough. I have to pinch myself every time I speak of this, because I hardly can't believe it myself. But since a couple of years, 3 years back, I would say, I make a living out of making role-playing games. And so does my colleagues in Free League. And we are today like 6 people from the core team that work full-time doing this. But as you say, that's pretty rare.
Yeah, I believe it's you and Magpie are the biggest.
I think
of
Chaosium.
the companies. And then once you get like, I think a 1 or 2 steps away to the next biggest game, you drop down to it's just a couple. It's just 2 people, and it is just these successes come all too rarely, and they really need to be celebrated when they do, because there's so much work that has to be put into for every victory that comes along the way. There's a lot of luck involved, no doubt, but it also does not happen without the sacrifice to get there. As you mentioned, that marathon to come along the way, and it is just not talked about enough on just how small these companies really are and how much they're up against to make that work. It's difficult. This is a product that, in order for 6 people to play, only 1 book might be purchased. And that's a very difficult ratio to make balance.
I'm not one to complain, just because it's such a labor of love. You can stand this because it's not just a marathon in the sense that you're constantly running over a long period of time. It's also that you basically run from you open your eyes in the morning until they automatically slam shut when you like faint at the table. I mean, during that period when you build something up, and I think this goes for many small business entrepreneurs. Not only in role-playing games, but you work 70 hours a week.
Yeah, that drive, and I didn't mean to make it sound like it was completely grueling and just a terrible life, because there is this drive and this love for this game that if you didn't have that, we wouldn't have the games to enjoy. And it is something that I am in awe in over here, and watching and hearing these stories, because it is so it is climbing the mountain, and it is you want to reach that peak, and it's almost that mountain climber's mentality. I also don't understand why anyone would put themselves through that, but I'm also in awe when they do, and when they reach that peak, and even in those stories where you don't reach that peak, just the attempt at the climb is something to be celebrated. And I can hear also from that time that you mentioned when your company had been liquidated and you were not making games, that you spent most of that time scratching at the walls trying to find a way to get back to creating again and finding it work out. And I do want to talk about Symbaroum, but we're almost here at the story now of the present day. So these 2 companies are existing side by side, and the intention is to hopefully one day bring them together. And Symbaroum has been released in Sweden, and these other games from Free League are starting to make their way over here with games like Mutant Year Zero and Coriolis. And I believe at that timeline, Tales from the Loop and Free League and Forbidden Lands are a glint in somebody's eye. They haven't happened yet. And slowly those doors are beginning to open up. And so how did these two how did this bring us now around the final bend as this circle completes itself?
We had a meeting, I believe, in April of 2018. So this is soon 3 years ago. And at that meeting, we set up some ground rules, common. We decided in that meeting that we would be able to work together. So it was an important meeting. Then we were discussing details of the merger during 4 or 5 months or something like that. But already in, I think, late August, me and Martin Grip started working on or started working with the Free League team. So the merger was not finalized until early 19, I think, but we were already working as a team in late 2018.
By the time you and I first met in August of 2019 at Gen Con, that was, I believe, not long after the announcement had been made that these two companies, and that was the first time now Symbaroum on the shelves at Gen Con being shown around. And
we were, and this is very important for you talked about the sport. Our very dear friends from the British Isles, namely Modifius, who helped both Free League and Järnringen during the first struggling steps towards the international scene.
Yeah, they were responsible, I believe, for much of the publishing and distribution of the English games.
Yeah, also Symbaroum. So me and Martin actually was a couple of times at Gen Con with Järnringen together with Modifius and marketed Symbaroum with them. But 19, it was the first time that we, after the merger, that we were the new Free League, if you will.
Yeah, that was around when Free League began referring to themselves more publicly as Free League Games, and and it became this a legion now of these disparate game developers, all now coming together under this greater umbrella, bringing all of these games and being reunited with Coriolis, which all those years ago you had to liquidate to keep it alive. You're now back with the same company, and these games and these owners are once again in the same house.
Not only that. Sometime last year, I can't remember exactly when, I think it was during the first quarter last year, we actually reacquired the brand, the IP of Coriolis. So now we own it again.
Oh, when's the documentary coming out? I want to watch that. The story is just so phenomenal, and it is such a success, and it is such it's such an inspiration. It listening to that has got my heart racing, and I'm just full of so much joy, really, for hearing how the road you've had to go down and how long that has been. I mean, from the time from playing in university to today, the 20 years it has been, and the ups and the downs that you have gone through to get to this point. And so that's I really thought it was important for us to start our interview about this game on putting into context just how much has it been there to get up to the starter kit, because there's a lot that has happened. So let's shift gears to Symbaroum specifically, because I also want you to help me introduce this game to the Terrible Warriors, because I'm hoping to break it down and do character creation, and then hopefully once we get back to playing games on the podcast to be able to actually show this world off, because it is easy to underestimate. And I hear what you're saying about those who have picked it up have found something very special in their hands. And yet it is, as we talked early on, a fantasy RPG, which can create this, another one kind of feel. And I don't think that is fair for Symbaroum. So tell me a bit about what do we expect to get when we pick up this book and we open it up for the first time? What is Symbaroum?
I think one of the best ways I know to describe what sets it apart from your typical standard high fantasy heroic kind of game is it is a quote from I think it was a German reviewer who once said that the world of Symbaroum is like Princess Mononoke meets Game of Thrones. So are you familiar with both of those references?
Every single time, again, it has not happened because of the pandemic, but whenever Mononoke is screened at a cinema here in Toronto, I am the first one to pick up the ticket to that show. That movie, when the overture plays as the main character is leaving the village for the first time on his elk, and the music swells as he leaves over the hills. Tears in my eyes every time.
Yeah.
And then right behind me, I have a signed copy of Dance of Dragons from Game of Thrones. So yeah, I'm a little familiar with both of those.
So let me explain why I think that's such a good analogy. Or yeah.
Yeah, please do.
It's Game of Thrones in the sense that you have this fantastical setting that is not magical in your face. There is magic, but the world is not dominated by magicians or these extremely powerful wizards somewhere. It is also Game of Thrones in the sense that there is no apparent good or evil in the setting of Symbaroum. It is it's not a fairy tale, if you will. There is, of course, good and evil, but what is good and evil in the setting of Symbaroum is very much a question of where you stand, a question of perspective.
Yeah, the victors get to write the history.
Yeah. There are all these factions and parts of society, and depending on where you stand and who you are, you will have friends and you will have enemies, and you will have likes and you will have dislikes. There is no evil superlord that everyone in your society has agreed to that he or she must be destroyed. What is Mononoke about Symbaroum is the theme of the stories, or indeed the theme of the design process behind the setting, especially how the society of the setting is formed. And that theme, or that main conflict, is the conflict between civilization and nature, and toying with the idea of, or actually quite seriously toying with the idea of what would happen if nature had the capacity to react and strike back at our civilization's attempt to cultivate it, and not flat out exploit it, but utilize it and force its structures on it, if you will. So much of the setting draws from that dynamic where you have creation not being super happy about being forced to become civilized. So I know we are this sounds very abstract, but
these are very big ideas. Yeah.
It takes a number of very concrete forms in the setting. The setting has been described as dark, as gritty. Combined with the system, it is very deadly compared to most heroic fantasy games. It has a more serious undertone in this. If you want, you can play Symbaroum as a hack and slash, no problem. The system has a potential for crunch, absolutely, but it's compared to the other big fantasy IPs. I would say that the system is much quicker. You can decide a 5-on-5 combat situation in 30 minutes. Instead of, in some games, you start midday and you continue the next game session.
Yeah, well, we did try to do very back at the beginning of the podcast to actually play out a 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons dungeon delve, and we recorded for 4 hours a single combat in one room, and it was like, well, we have to change the rules if we're going to get this done in time.
So that won't happen in Symbaroum, I can tell you. But on the other hand, the system is, I should say that the lead game designer or rules designer is not me, but Mattias Lilja. I mainly focus on setting and adventures. But it has often been said that the Symbaroum system is a kind of merge of, or maybe something in between the really crunchy systems like 5e and more narrative systems like Apocalypse World or these rules light systems.
There's a pendulum that has swung when I first came into contact with a Powered by Apocalypse game. That's all I wanted to play for years, and now I feel the pendulum swinging back in the other direction of wanting to have a little bit more rules to be able to. Powered by Apocalypse games are very fun, but there is a limitation because the rules are so light. The games can be quite chaotic, and they can run away from you once you try to step out of whatever spotlight that game has on it. And so I have found myself being drawn back towards a lot of the games from Free League actually that offer some more guidance and some more control in being able to tell those stories. And that's exciting to hear that it's you say that it combines kind of both of those worlds of the traditional crunchy RPG versus the more modern, very storytelling rules light setting.
Yeah, it is a D20 system roll under in its base. You have 8 you can say attributes that vary between 5 and 15, and when you try to do something, you need to grab your D20 and roll under your score in that attribute. That's the basic mechanic of the system. Then there are stuff that complicate things. First and foremost, the system is fully player facing, meaning that the players roll, at least raw players are rolling all dice. You can play it if the DM is like very keen on rolling dice. That's possible as well.
So there's nothing up the GM's sleeves. They're playing a role more of an adjudicator.
Oh yeah, exactly. A narrator and also keeping track of track of what's going on.
But it is the players telling the GM what they want to do, not the other way around.
Really so, yeah. So and this is a system in combat, for instance, or in problem-solving situations. The D20 you roll is the success test is always modified by the opponent or a degree of difficulty. So if you are trying to hit someone that is very nimble and agile, you will have a harder time hitting him or her or it. And also we have a system for damage where the players actually roll their armor against the static damage value of the enemy.
Now, I don't want to pull you into having to explain these mechanics that you are not. You mentioned that it's the setting for you that you've helped create. What is it about the Symbaroum setting that you feel hooks players, especially new players, when they first get into it? Because you did mention when you first printed this game that even when it was just that cult success, that there was something about this world that seemed to grab players, and it became their this hidden gem that they would have on their bookshelf, this little secret of this wonderful world that they had that very few people at the time knew about. What is it about Symbaroum that you feel now, as the starter kit has just been released, that hooks new players into the world and keeps them coming back for more?
I think what hooks players on Symbaroum in general is the art. Because Martin has done a an amazing job in bringing this setting to life in his artwork. So, but the second thing is that you will, and now I can only speculate, but to me, it after having talked to a lot of people, it feels like what amazes people first is that when they start reading this game, they feel that there is a very strong connection between the illustrations, the art, and what is actually written. So, and this is, of course, we have known each other for 35 years. We have made games and played games together. We have designed this game together as well. And there is only this one artist. So what you find when you start exploring the setting of Symbaroum is that it is very tightly created in terms of both feel, thematics, and the illustrations of it. Then I believe aside from the fact that it draws from this conflict between civilization and nature, you also get to explore a lot of other, classical themes in this setting. You have a very, very pronounced focus on colonialism, in the sense that the setting is about this sudden civilization that has been forced to flee from their now dead ancestral homelands, and they come to this new area where the game is set as colonizers and basically as invaders, and that.
But also as refugees, depending on your perspective.
Yeah, also as refugees. Yeah. They see themselves as victims and refugees, and they come to this country. Then I think one other thing that sets the setting of Symbaroum apart from other games is that it's quite geographically and historically limited. It is not, one globe or one big continent. It is one land, one relatively small kingdom at the border of this enormous forest called Davokar, which is growing over the ancient. So here comes the mystery part, which I think is what really sells the game. So this civilization of Umbria, as it is called, lies on the border of a gigantic forest called Davokar, and this forest shields or is covering the ruins of the ancient and since long fallen empire of Symbaroum. So and the starter set is specifically designed for you to head out from Umbria, from the border town of Thistlehold, out into this massive dark forest that is almost like a being in its own right.
It almost sounds like another kind of invasion that is happening.
Yeah, but it's also, again, I think the Ambrians would see it as they are after the resources. You have.
Oh, I meant the forest itself being an invasion of a sorts of the way it is growing and taking and reclaiming land of this fallen kingdom.
Precisely, and what we have in the forest is the elves of the Iron Pact, which, if you want to pinpoint the two most prominent faction that represents civilization and nature, you have the Ambrians, this kingdom of refugees and colonizers on the one hand as representatives for civilization, and then you have the elves of the Iron Pact as representatives for nature, as their protectors or guardians or wardens of this enormous forest, and they even claim that there is this ancient treaty called the Iron Pact, which bans humans from ever entering this forest, and that actually gives the elves the right to use violence against humans if they do transgress. In between these extremes, the elves and the Ambrians, you have the clan folks of 11. The Ambrians call them barbarians, who actually live in the border region, often inside the border of Davokar, because in the outskirts, if you know how to behave, you follow the taboos set forth by the Huldra, the witch of the clan folks, the head witch, you can call her maybe, the clan folks, then you can live in harmony with Davokar. It's just that the Ambrians aren't very interested in harmony. And they scoff at, the elves and the witches. They claim that the evil, the darkness of Davokar will awaken if you start stirring in its ruins and delving too deep, and if you are too greedy. And the Ambrians go like, okay. You what you're saying is that you don't want us in there to reap your, the resources of the forest. So
you get to have all this bounty, and we get to starve out here. And I see what you mean about there. Like, depending on your perspective, it's warring ideologies, but it's not a story of good and evil. It's a story of desperation, or of like these different communities that all have needs that need to be met, and but are pitted against each other, where these are not, at the time, or at least the start of the game, ideologies that are compatible with one another.
Was I to be really pretentious, I would say that it's a story about being human.
Yeah.
In a sense. And then you have all these fantasy allegoricals and symbols to dress up the interesting conflicts and questions that arise from living, and you can set them in motion. And I believe very much of, we talked Game of Thrones earlier, but there are other examples as well of fantastical settings that are used to, not enact a story of good and evil, but a more general one about, or more nuanced, if you will. But again, if you want to play Symbaroum as hack and slash, and you want a classic arch enemy, I mean, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. And that's one of the great things about role-playing games. What we intend or want to do with the game we create is one thing, but when it hits the table, it becomes something else. And that's how it's supposed to be. So I know of many who play Symbaroum much like they would play 5e or Pathfinder or whatever.
So the starter kit has just very recently been released. It's now available to purchase. What will we get with the starter kit when we open it? What is there to be expected? I understand there's some pre-generated characters. There's an adventure. What do we get with the starter kit to set us on our first journey into Symbaroum?
Yeah, it's the starter set has a byline which is treasure hunts in Davokar. So that pretty much spells it out. What you get is a 64-page rulebook, including the original rules, but scaled down to size to make them more easily accessible, I would say. But you can still use them to, gain some experience and buy some new talents and such. Aside from the rulebook, there is the Adventure Compendium, which includes 2 adventure landscapes, which is basically 2 ruins placed out in the forest of Davokar that you can explore, and where you will come to, get the first whiff of the mystery of Symbaroum, which is, does the elves have a point in claiming that there is some ancient evil here slumbering beneath root and moss? And if so, are we about to awake it? Aside from that, we wanted to make a starter set that you actually can play with for a while. It's not just one scenario and then you are expected to buy the whole product line. So there are some rules, and this is actually a design philosophy that has been a design philosophy of Free League for a long time. We have guidelines and rules for designing your own treasure hunts, or if you will, you can use tables to randomly create adventures as you go along playing. So hopefully our idea or our goal is that you will get quite a lot of gaming hours out of this one box.
It's not just like a short 30-minute demo that will just introduce just the bare mechanics of the game that get you hooked enough. It does in a way sound like a full game in its own right.
Yeah.
Even if it is just scratching the surface of the actual setting.
Yeah, the focus is very much on treasure hunts and expeditions out into the forest. When you have the full set of core books for the Symbaroum game, you will see that a lot of the game also supports this, the intrigue and the problem solving and the social dilemmas and so on. But while the starter set will set you off on a path towards the forest.
Camera's got a bit of a tighter focus on a specific place in there. Where can we follow up with you, Mattias, and with Symbaroum as a whole? I've been listening to you now for the last hour, and I'm hooked. I want to get this. Where should we go to know more about this game and the games that you are making, as well as Free League as a whole?
Yeah, freeleaguepublishing.com is our home in the virtual world, if you will. And then you should definitely look up our Facebook, because that's one of our main sources of communication when it comes to news and announcements and such. Also, Facebook is where you can reach us through PMs. And other than that, I would say that I think I can provide you with a couple of links. I don't know if you publish this in a way.
Absolutely, it'll be in the show notes. You can follow it up with me after we're done talking, and I link everything. Of course, I only offer that up because not everyone checks the show notes, so I try to include that at the end of our conversations, that they have that. And so I've actually been really surprised lately on just how active many creators are on these Facebook groups, and if you've got questions about the game or feedback or clarifications and that, it's these developers are very busy with all the things that they're doing. They're also just as passionate about these games as you are, and want to be available to help clear things up, as it were. So Symbaroum is the starter kit is available now. Check the show notes. There's links to all the pages, all the groups, all of that where you can follow. And of course, I'll also be linking to other interviews we've met with. We've mentioned him a couple of times now, Thomas Haremston, also from Free League. We've talked to him twice before, and you can go back and listen. I don't think those interviews have, they're not, they're a little bit dated now because of so much that's happened at Free League since we've talked, but they're still wonderful conversations. If you want to hear what the other half of this story sounds like, Thomas has shared some of that story with us in the past, and so they're also available. Mattias, thank you so much for spending time with me here today. And I'm very much looking forward to opening up Symbaroum for our Session Zero story and creating characters in this world and learning more about this setting. And I really hope that after we've had a chance to play through this game and explore that world a little bit more, that in the future we can reconnect and check in with each other.
Oh, absolutely. This was a pure joy, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing what you think when you really dig your teeth into the course or the starter set, and hopefully it will leave you hungry for more, and then now you know where to find it.
I'm listening to it. I'm very interested in learning more about this this witch that you've mentioned a few times now, in this border at the in the forest, and these barbarians. There's this mystery. What's going on? And it reminds me a little bit of Forbidden Lands' Blood Mist and the stories and the mysteries that are behind there. That are these mysteries that have an answer, or are these things that will be discovered by each group as they play the game?
We are talking about the starter set today, so I don't know.
There's no answers to be found there.
No, and we shan't go very much further into it. But
I don't want to spoil anything. No, of course not.
What I can say is that the if you will, the flagship of Symbaroum, at least to me as a setting and adventure writer, is a 6-part adventure chronicle called The Throne of Thorns. I've just finished writing the 5th episode, which is supposed to hit the shelves later this year. And playing Throne of Thorns, you will get all the answers you want and those you didn't want. I promise you that.
Thanks to Free League Games for getting us in touch with Mattias. We enjoyed that conversation. Can't wait to do it again. Be sure to check the show notes for all the links regarding Symbaroum and Free League, where you can get in touch with them and follow up on all of their future happenings. And for our future happenings, follow us on Twitter at Dice Warriors. Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Terrible Warriors, where, as it happens, our private monthly game is running a Free League game. I'm taking them through the Forbidden Lands. We're playing the Raven's Purge campaign, so if you'd like to give that a shot, come join us. We'd love to have you. We play them every month. We'll be back next week with another meeting of the makers, but this maker isn't making games. They're making a tool that is going to help make your games much more immersive, and it launches on the App Store next week. Come back and find out more here on Terrible Warriors as we talk to the creators of Tabletop Tunes. And between now and then and all the other instances when we get to play our games and sit at our tables, thank you for listening to the Terrible Warriors, and be good to each other.